Let's talk about robots. You see, when people talk about robots in the way that you did, they seem to be implying or insinuating that God didn't want machines who couldn't think and feel by themselves, and he wanted free thinkers who had the capability within themselves to make their own decisions and live by their own free will, right? You're saying God didn't want just these constructed machines that only do exactly what they were made to do. He wanted something that was a little bit more creative, something that could go beyond the bounds of what inputs we provided, right? But like I said before, let's talk about robots because I think there's something here that you might be missing. When discussing robots, we have two major things that I want to focus in on here. The first is the hardware, and the second is the software. And of course, you're familiar with both of those terms, I'm sure. The hardware being the physical, defined structure that was built with all of its joints and hinges and features to be able to carry out and perform certain physical functions in its physical space. We could compare that physical hardware to our flesh, the world we live in, the environment around us, but most importantly, our mind and body, right? But the software is equally important to the construction of a robot because without software, the robot couldn't perform any functions whatsoever. If I was to create a robot, it wouldn't be able to do anything that I didn't design it to do via the software. It couldn't think the way it wants to think. It would only think the way I made it to think. It wouldn't be able to make decisions outside of the bounds of its own understanding. It could only make decisions within the bounds of the understanding that I've given it. But let's think about this for another minute or two, shall we? Didn't God provide us with both the hardware and the software that he designed us with initially? The way that I think, the way that my brain processes information, the way my medulla oblongata regulates emotional response, the way that my body responds to physical stressors in my environment, the way that I feel, the way that I am sensitive, the way that I react to my environment is based off of the software that was put into my head or into my heart when I was born. Am I capable of thinking outside of the bounds of what I was given to go off of and given to work with from the day I was born? Of course not. I can only think within the bounds of the capabilities I have. That's why if I had a mental disability, you wouldn't expect me to be as capable as I am to perhaps speak, write, socialize, etc. in the way that I currently do. If God didn't want robots, as you say, then why did he design us with such obvious limitations to our sight, our hearing, our speech, our thinking, our cognitive abilities, our abilities to perceive extra-dimensional realms or other spectrums of light? He limited our ability to analyze, to understand, and to react with the world environment around us. So essentially, if God doesn't want robots, well, then he shouldn't have made them in the first place. Literally, the only way God could create something that's not a robot, not confined within the bounds of the limitations that he's given us, would be if he literally spawned another version of himself that could also think in the grand manner that he thinks, that can understand and comprehend the things that he understands and comprehends, that can create outside of the bounds of what we can create. An equal would have been the only way he could create something that wouldn't be a subservient robot to him, since he's omnipotent, right? You say that our true human nature surfaces when we're faced with adversity. But the reality is what surfaces when we're faced with adversity is the intrinsic software programmed response that we were handed by this God of yours when we were born in the first place. So we can't really respond outside of that, can we? The fact that so many people think that God created everything, but that he didn't create our mind, our brain, our thinking, our language, our cognitive abilities, our spiritual perception. Did he create those things too? Because if he did, and we can't figure out who he is and don't know him, trust him, believe him, follow him, whose fault is that really? I think it's a design flaw. Or maybe God had nothing to do with it.